"You deserve a better life," Genevieve whispered, her voice trembling as she slipped away from the glittering Christmas party, leaving Alexander Whitmore stunned amidst the twinkling lights and festive cheer. Welcome, beautiful souls, to a tale of love, sacrifice, and heartbreak that will keep you guessing until the very end. Where are you joining us from today? Share in the comments below and let us know. Will this story unfold as you predict, or will its twist surprise you? Picture a billionaire, his world of steel and glass shaken by a woman whose strength and grace redefine his dreams, only to face a storm that tests their bond. Subscribe now to catch every new chapter of this emotional journey, and join us as we unravel whether love can conquer all or crumble under life's weight. What secrets lie behind Genevieve's choice to vanish? The city awoke under a golden veil, the morning sun weaving light through the glass canyons of towering skyscrapers, each a monument to ambition and will. Alexander Whitmore stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, high above the urban sprawl, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke navy suit. At 30, with piercing blue eyes and blonde hair just beginning to silver at the temples, he was the embodiment of success, a billionaire who had clawed his way from a carpenter's son to a titan of real estate. His empire of steel and glass stretched across the skyline, each building a testament to his relentless drive. Yet as the sun painted the city in hues of amber and gold, an unfamiliar restlessness stirred within him, a whisper in the air that felt like the prelude to a storm. He couldn't name it, but it clung to him like the faint scent of autumn on the breeze, sharp and unsettling. Alexander turned from the window, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor as he made his way to the boardroom. The space hummed with the familiar energy of power. Junior executives shuffled papers with nervous precision. Senior partners exchanged measured small talk, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint clink of porcelain cups. The mahogany table, stretching 20 feet and polished to a mirror's sheen, reflected the morning light like a still lake. Alexander took his customary seat at its head, his presence commanding silence without effort. This was meant to be a routine quarterly review, the kind he'd sat through countless times, dissecting projections and strategies with the precision of a surgeon. But that strange, unshakable feeling lingered, as if the air itself held its breath, waiting for something or someone to disrupt the rhythm of his carefully ordered world. His assistant Clara leaned in, her voice a discreet murmur against the room's buzz. "The new marketing director from Horizon Strategies is here to present," she said, sliding a sleek portfolio across the table, its silver-embossed logo catching the light. Alexander nodded absently, his attention drifting to the financial charts projected on the screen before him. Numbers had always been his language, a code he deciphered to build his fortune. But then the boardroom door opened, and time seemed to falter, the ambient noise fading to a distant hum. Genevieve Okoye stepped into the room, and the world shifted on its axis. She moved with a grace that was both effortless and commanding, each step purposeful yet fluid, as if she were dancing to a melody only she could hear. Her emerald dress hugged her ebony skin, the fabric catching the light in a way that made it seem alive, shimmering with every movement. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, revealing the striking architecture of her cheekbones and the subtle warmth of her complexion. But it wasn't just her beauty that stilled the room. It was the quiet confidence she carried, an invisible force that demanded attention without a single word. Every head turned, every conversation paused, as if the gravity of the room had realigned itself around her. "Good morning, everyone," Genevieve began, her voice a melodic blend of warmth and authority, laced with a faint accent that Alexander couldn't place. A hint of something exotic, perhaps African, softened by cosmopolitan polish. "I'm Genevieve Okoye, Director of Strategic Marketing at Horizon Strategies. Today, I'll present our vision for Whitmore Enterprises' latest venture." Her almond-shaped eyes swept the room, landing briefly on Alexander, holding his gaze for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. It was enough to send a jolt through him, a spark that ignited something dormant in his carefully controlled heart. She stepped to the podium, her movements precise yet natural, and began her presentation. It was flawless, every statistic backed by rigorous research, every projection grounded in real-world data. She navigated complex market analyses with the ease of someone discussing a favorite book, making the technical accessible, the mundane compelling. Alexander found himself leaning forward, not just to follow her slides, but to absorb her presence. It was the way she gestured, her hands elegant and deliberate, emphasizing key points with a grace that felt almost choreographed. It was the slight tilt of her head when addressing a question, the subtle arch of her eyebrow when delivering a particularly striking insight. She was a study in contradictions, professionally polished yet authentically warm, confident yet approachable, serious yet quick to flash a smile that lit the room like a sunrise. The boardroom, usually a place of calculated restraint, came alive under her influence. Junior executives scribbled notes furiously, senior partners nodded with rare enthusiasm, and even the most cynical among them couldn't resist her charm. Alexander noticed the smallest details, the delicate gold bracelet that caught the light when she gestured, the way she pronounced certain words with that captivating accent, the intelligence that sparkled in her eyes when she fielded a complex question from his CFO. She wasn't just presenting, she was orchestrating, weaving data and vision into a narrative that held everyone captive. The meeting stretched 30 minutes past its allotted time, but no one glanced at their watch or shifted restlessly. When Genevieve concluded, the applause was spontaneous, genuine, a rare break from the boardroom's usual decorum. She accepted compliments with grace, remembering names, responding to questions with a sincerity that made each person feel seen. Alexander remained seated, pretending to review his notes, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the way her eyes had met his, the way her voice had seemed to speak directly to him. For the first time in years, he felt off balance, like a man standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to step back or leap. As the room cleared, Genevieve gathered her materials, sliding presentation boards into a sleek leather portfolio with methodical precision. The sunlight streaming through the windows caught her hair, revealing subtle highlights that shimmered like polished ebony. Without looking up, she spoke, her voice softer now, almost intimate in the emptying room. I hope the presentation met your expectations, Mr. Whitmore. Alexander stood, straightening his tie out of habit, though it was already perfect. Please call me Alexander, he replied, moving toward her with measured steps. And it didn't just meet expectations, it redefined them. He reached for one of her business cards on the podium, noting its elegant simplicity. I have a feeling this is the beginning of something extraordinary. Genevieve looked up, her hazel eyes meeting his with a smile that held a hint of curiosity, perhaps even challenge. I certainly hope so, she said, closing her portfolio with a soft click. Horizon Strategies values partnerships that endure. As she gathered her belongings, Alexander searched for a reason to prolong the moment. Your accent, he ventured, genuine interest mingling with a need to keep her there. It's unique. Her eyes lit up, a spark of pleasure at his observation. A blend of my roots and my travels, she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a small gesture that felt more revealing than her polished presentation. Thank you for noticing. As she walked away, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor, Alexander watched her go, a certainty settling in his chest. That morning's restlessness had a name now, a face, a voice. Genevieve Okoye had walked into his boardroom and shifted the foundations of his world. He didn't know yet how deeply she would change him, but as he stood alone in the quiet room, the city skyline glittering beyond the windows, he felt the first stirrings of a story that would rewrite everything he thought he knew about love, ambition, and the courage to chase what truly mattered. The lobby cafe of Alexander Whitmore's flagship tower buzzed with the morning rush, a symphony of clinking cups and murmured orders, the air rich with the scent of roasted coffee beans and warm pastries. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bouncing off the marble countertops and casting a soft glow across the sleek, modern space. Alexander sat at a corner table, his laptop open to a spreadsheet he wasn't reading, his piercing blue eyes fixed on the entrance. At 30, he was a man accustomed to control. Every deal, every building, every moment of his life meticulously planned. Yet since Genevieve Okoye's presentation, his carefully ordered world felt like it was teetering on the edge of something thrillingly unpredictable. He'd memorized her routine. Every morning, at precisely 8:50, She ordered a latte with a dash of cinnamon, her presence turning the mundane cafe into a stage. Today, he was determined to make their paths cross, to turn chance into destiny. He adjusted his tie, a cobalt blue silk that felt like a talisman, and sipped his black coffee, the bitter taste grounding him as he rehearsed what he might say. Alexander Whitmore, the billionaire who could negotiate billion-dollar deals without a flicker of doubt, was nervous. The thought was absurd, yet his pulse quickened as the clock ticked closer to her arrival. He'd orchestrated these accidental encounters before, lingering in the lobby, timing his exits to brush past her, but their exchanges had been brief, professional, tinged with a spark neither acknowledged. Today would be different. He'd make sure of it. At 8:52, the cafe door chimed and Genevieve entered, a vision in a burgundy coat that hugged her frame, her ebony skin catching the light like polished obsidian. Her dark hair was swept into a loose braid, a few strands framing her face, and her almond-shaped eyes scanned the room with that quiet confidence that had first captivated him. She moved to the counter, exchanging a warm smile with the barista, her voice a soft melody as she placed her order. Alexander's heart thudded, a rhythm he hadn't felt since he was a young man chasing his first big deal. He stood, timing his approach to the cream and sugar station with calculated precision, his movements casual but his intent razor-sharp. He reached for a stir just as Genevieve turned with her latte, and in his eagerness to seem natural, he misjudged the distance. His shoulder grazed her elbow and time slowed as her cup tilted, the creamy liquid arcing through the air to splash across his pristine white shirt. The cafe seemed to hush, all eyes drawn to the spectacle. "Oh no!" Genevieve gasped, her professional poise shattering, her hazel eyes wide with mortification. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry." Her accent, that captivating blend of warmth and polish, made his name sound like a song, even in her distress. Alexander looked down at the coffee soaking his shirt, the brown stains spreading like a Jackson Pollock painting, and did something that surprised them both. He laughed, not the measured chuckle he used in boardrooms, but a deep, genuine laugh that bubbled up from a place he'd forgotten existed. "If this is what it takes to get you to call me Alexander," he said, grabbing napkins from the dispenser, "it's a small price to pay." Her concern softened into a hesitant smile, and she handed him more napkins, their fingers brushing for a fleeting moment that sent a spark through him. "Let me buy you a replacement coffee," he insisted, dabbing ineffectually at his shirt, more to prolong the moment than to save the fabric. "It's the least I can do for disrupting your morning ritual." Genevieve tilted her head, studying him with a mix of amusement and curiosity. "Disrupting my ritual? Should I be worried you know my coffee schedule, Alexander?" Her teasing tone carried a playful challenge, and he caught the glint in her eyes, a spark that matched his own. "I plead the fifth," he replied, grinning, "though I'll admit to excellent observational skills. It's part of what makes me good at my job." They moved to the counter together, the barista already preparing her latte with a knowing smile. "And what else do these skills tell you?" Genevieve asked, her voice light but her gaze piercing, as if she could see through his polished exterior to the man beneath. Alexander didn't hesitate, his words spilling out with a boldness that surprised him. "That you take your latte with a dash of cinnamon because you like a hint of warmth. That you wear jewel tones because they complement your radiance. That you're left-handed but gesture with your right during presentations. And that you've been keeping me at a professional distance, despite—" He paused, searching for the right words, his heart pounding. "Even though we both feel something here." The barista called out another order, but neither moved. The air between them was charged with unspoken possibility. Genevieve's eyes widened slightly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "That's quite observant," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Too observant?" he asked, suddenly worried he'd crossed a line. She considered for a moment, then her smile returned, warm and genuine, reaching her eyes. "No, just observant enough to be intriguing," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. A small, unconscious gesture that felt more intimate than any boardroom exchange. They collected their drinks and found a small table by the window, the city's morning bustle a backdrop to their conversation. The cafe's noise faded as they talked, the world narrowing to the space between them. Genevieve shared her love for jazz, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup as she described late-night concerts in hidden venues. Alexander admitted to his humble beginnings, the son of a carpenter who taught him to build with his hands before he built with his mind. "I still have his old hammer," he confessed, a sheepish grin breaking through. "It's on my desk, a reminder of where I started." "That's beautiful," Genevieve said, her voice soft with sincerity. "It's rare to find someone who honors their roots while reaching for the stars." Her words struck a chord, and Alexander felt a warmth he hadn't known he was missing. They talked about her knack for spotting market trends, his obsession with architectural precision, and the way their worlds, hers vibrant and intuitive, his structured and strategic, seemed to complement each other in ways neither had expected. As their cups emptied, the conversation lingered, neither wanting to break the spell. Alexander took a chance, his voice steady despite the leap he was about to take. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said, not a question but not quite a command, his blue eyes locked on hers. Genevieve sipped her latte, considering him over the rim of her cup. "That could be complicated," she said finally, her tone careful but her eyes dancing with mischief. "We're still working together." "Then I'll sign the contract with Horizon Strategies today," he countered, leaning closer. "I decided to accept your proposal weeks ago. The negotiations have just been an excuse to see you." Her eyebrows rose at his honesty, a smile tugging at her lips. "That's not very professional, Alexander," she teased, but her voice held a warmth that betrayed her interest. "Call it personal," he said, his voice softening. "Very personal. Have dinner with me, Genevieve." She was quiet for a moment, the cafe's hum filling the silence. Then she nodded, her smile radiant. "Ask me again when the contract's signed. I'm not known for being rushed." Alexander's grin matched hers, his heart soaring. "Deal, but I'm not known for waiting long." As she gathered her coat and left, her heels clicking against the marble floor, Alexander watched her go, the coffee stain on his shirt a badge of honor. The city moved on around him, but in that moment, the cafe felt like the center of the universe. He knew with a certainty that defied his usual calculations that this was no ordinary morning. It was the beginning of something extraordinary, a connection that would reshape his life, if only he could seize it. The city skyline blazed with 1,000 lights, each twinkling against the velvet night like stars brought down to earth. Alexander Whitmore stood in his private elevator, the hum of ascent barely audible over the pounding of his heart. His blonde hair caught the soft glow of the elevator's lights, and his cobalt blue tie, a favorite since Genevieve had complimented it, felt like a charm for what lay ahead. The contract with Horizon Strategies had been signed that morning, a formality rushed through with an urgency his legal team hadn't questioned, though their raised eyebrows spoke volumes. Alexander's pursuit of Genevieve Okoye had transformed from stolen glances in a cafe to a courtship that consumed his thoughts. Tonight, on the eve of Christmas, he was ready to stake everything on a single moment, to build not another skyscraper, but a future with a woman who had redefined his world. The elevator opened to the rooftop of his newest tower, still under construction, its skeletal frame draped in thousands of tiny white lights that shimmered like a private constellation. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of snow, and the city sprawled below, a glittering tapestry of ambition and dreams. Alexander had planned every detail with the precision of a man who built empires. A small table set with champagne, a string quartet tucked discreetly in the shadows, and, across the skyline, his flagship building waiting to play its part. He adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous habit, and checked his watch. 7:55 p.m. Genevieve would arrive any moment, believing this was a simple dinner to celebrate their professional success. She had no idea what he had in store. The sound of heels on concrete drew his gaze, and there she was, stepping onto the rooftop like a vision born from the night itself. Genevieve wore a midnight blue dress that clung to her ebony skin, its subtle shimmer catching the light with every movement. Her dark hair cascaded in loose waves, framing her face, and her hazel eyes sparkled with curiosity as she took in the scene. "Alexander, this is breathtaking," she said, her voice a melody that stirred his soul. "You didn't mention we'd be dining among the stars." Her smile, warm and teasing, made his carefully rehearsed words falter, but he recovered, offering his arm. "Only the best for you," he replied, guiding her to the table. They sat, the quartet beginning a soft rendition of a jazz piece she loved, the notes floating like snowflakes in the chilly air. Over champagne, they talked with the ease of two people who had found their rhythm, her stories of childhood dreams, his tales of early struggles that shaped his empire. Yet beneath his easy laughter, Alexander's nerves thrummed. He watched her every gesture, the way her fingers traced the stem of her glass, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of her ambitions. She was a force, a blend of strength and grace that had unraveled his guarded heart. As the quartet transitioned to a slower, more intimate melody, he knew the moment had come. "Genevieve," he said, standing and offering his hand, "come with me." She tilted her head, a playful question in her gaze, but took his hand, her touch sending a current through him. He led her to the rooftop's edge where a telescope stood, pointed at the skyline. "Look there," he said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. She leaned into the telescope, her breath catching as she saw it. Across the city, on the facade of his flagship building, lights arranged to spell out "Marry Me" in a glowing script that seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. Genevieve turned, her eyes wide with shock, only to find Alexander on one knee, a ring glinting in his hand. The custom design was a masterpiece. Modern geometric lines intertwined with intricate patterns inspired by her African heritage, a diamond catching the starlight like a captured dream. "Genevieve Okoye," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "You walked into my life and showed me that all I've built, every tower, every deal, was just a foundation waiting for something real. You challenge me, inspire me, make every moment brighter just by being you. I want to build a life with you, stronger than any skyscraper, deeper than any dream I've ever had. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to hold its breath. Genevieve's hand flew to her mouth, tears shimmering in her hazel eyes as the weight of his words settled over her. The quartet's music faded to a whisper, the city's hum a distant echo. For a moment she was silent, her gaze locked on his, searching, as if testing the truth of his promise. Then a smile broke across her face, radiant and unguarded, and she whispered, "Yes." The word was barely audible, drowned by the joy in her eyes, but it echoed in Alexander's heart like thunder. He slipped the ring onto her finger, the fit perfect, and stood, pulling her into his arms as snow began to fall, soft flakes dusting their shoulders like a blessing. They laughed, a sound of pure, unbridled happiness, as he spun her gently under the twinkling lights. The quartet played on, their music weaving through the night, and the city below seemed to celebrate with them, its lights pulsing in rhythm with their joy. Genevieve rested her head against his chest, her breath warm against his shirt. "You planned all this," she murmured, half accusing, half awed. "The lights, the music, the snow. It's like a fairy tale." Alexander chuckled, his arms tightening around her. "I'd move the stars themselves if it meant winning your heart." They lingered on the rooftop, reluctant to let the moment end. Genevieve traced the ring with her finger, marveling at its design. "It's us," she said softly. "Your precision, my heritage together." Alexander nodded, his throat tight. "That's what I want our life to be. A perfect blend of who we are." They talked of their future, of a wedding that would honor both their worlds, of dreams they hadn't dared voice until now. The snow fell thicker, blanketing the rooftop in quiet magic, and Alexander felt a certainty he'd never known before. This wasn't just a proposal, it was a vow, a promise to build something enduring, something true. As the quartet played their final notes, Alexander kissed her, soft at first, then deepening, a seal on the moment that felt like both an ending and a beginning. The city sparkled below, its lights a mirror to the hope in their hearts. They stood together, wrapped in each other's warmth, the world fading until it was just them. Two souls bound by a question asked and answered under a sky of stars and snow. Alexander knew as he held her close that this night would be the cornerstone of their story, a moment they'd return to when life tested them. For now, though, it was enough to stand together, their future unwritten but shimmering with possibility. The penthouse glowed with the warmth of a life newly woven, its sleek, modern lines softened by touches of Genevieve Okoye's vibrant heritage. Woven textiles in rich ochres and blues draped over furniture, framed art from her ancestral roots adorning the walls. Alexander Whitmore, now her husband, moved through their home with a quiet reverence, as if every corner held a piece of their shared story. Their marriage, still fresh from the vows exchanged under a canopy of roses and orchids, had transformed them into a power couple, their synergy elevating Whitmore Enterprises to new heights. Genevieve's marketing brilliance sparked campaigns that dazzled the industry, while Alexander's strategic acumen turned her visions into reality. Yet beneath the surface of their perfect union, a shadow was stirring, subtle but insidious, waiting to test the foundations they'd built together. It began with a faint tremor, a fleeting dizziness that Genevieve dismissed as the residue of a long workday. She stood at her desk in their home office, reviewing a new campaign proposal, her hazel eyes scanning data with the same intensity that had first captivated Alexander. Her hands shook as she reached for her coffee, the cup rattling against the saucer, and she laughed it off, blaming too many late nights. But the moments multiplied, her fingers fumbling with a pen, her balance wavering as she crossed the room. Alexander noticed, his blue eyes sharpening with concern, but she waved him away with a smile, her grace unshaken even as her body betrayed her. "Just tired," she insisted, her voice a melody that soothed his worry, though it lingered like a ghost in his chest. The night of their first anniversary, the city sparkled below their penthouse, its lights a mirror to the love they'd nurtured. Alexander had planned a private dinner, recreating their first date with candlelight and the same Italian wine they'd shared. Genevieve wore a sapphire dress that hugged her ebony skin, her hair cascading in waves that caught the glow of the candles. They laughed over memories, their hands entwined across the table. But as she stood to refill her glass, her legs buckled. The world tilted, and she clutched the table's edge, her breath catching. Alexander was at her side in an instant, his arms steadying her, his face etched with a fear he couldn't hide. "Genevieve," he said, his voice low but firm, "we're going to the hospital. Now." The emergency room was a blur of sterile, white and urgent voices, the antiseptic smell clashing with the warmth of Genevieve's perfume. Alexander gripped her hand, his calloused fingers a stark contrast to her softness, as nurses drew blood and doctors ordered tests. Hours stretched into eternity, each tick of the clock a hammer against his heart. Genevieve sat upright, her poise unbroken despite the hospital gown, her eyes meeting his with a quiet strength that made him ache. "I'm fine," she whispered, but her trembling hand betrayed her words. Finally, Dr. Evelyn Carter, a neurologist with a reputation for unraveling medical mysteries, entered with a chart and a grave expression. "Mrs. Whitmore," she began, her tone measured, "we found abnormalities in your tests. It's a rare autoimmune disorder, attacks your nervous system, particularly your motor functions. We need to admit you for further evaluation." The words landed like a blow, stealing the air from the room. Alexander's mind, so adept at solving problems with money and strategy, reeled at its sudden powerlessness. Genevieve nodded, her jaw tight, and squeezed his hand. "Tell me everything, Dr. Carter," she said, her voice steady. "I need to know what I'm facing." The doctor outlined a grueling path: immunosuppressants to slow the disease, physical therapy to maintain strength, and a long road of uncertainty. Alexander listened, his businessman's instinct kicking in, already calculating how to secure the best specialists, the finest care. But beneath his resolve, fear coiled, a silent acknowledgement that this was a battle no amount of wealth could simply win. Back home, Alexander transformed their penthouse into a sanctuary tailored to Genevieve's needs. He installed support bars in the bathroom, their sleek design blending with the decor to avoid a clinical feel. A spare room became a rehabilitation space, equipped with state-of-the-art therapy tools, yet adorned with her favorite orchids to keep it theirs. He hired the best therapists, ensuring they came to her, sparing her the exhaustion of travel. Every detail was deliberate, a testament to his love, though he saw the shadow in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking, a fear of becoming less than the woman he'd fallen for. Genevieve fought with a quiet ferocity that humbled him. Physical therapy sessions were brutal, leaving her trembling and tear-streaked, But she never faltered. She celebrated small victories, a steadier hand holding a spoon, a step taken without support, with a smile that lit the room. Alexander became her constant, reading poetry from her favorite collections when fatigue overwhelmed her, his voice a steady anchor through the storm. One evening, as she struggled to lift a glass, tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm supposed to be your partner," she whispered, "not your patient." He knelt beside her, wiping her tears with infinite tenderness. "You are my heart," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "My home. We'll face this together, every step." Their evenings became rituals of resilience. They'd sit on their balcony, the city lights twinkling below, and he'd massage her trembling hands, working out the tension with a care he'd once reserved for blueprints. She'd dictate ideas for her next campaign, her mind as sharp as ever, and he'd type them. Their collaboration, a new kind of intimacy. He learned to anticipate her needs, when to offer support, when to let her fight alone. Yet each small triumph was shadowed by the reality of her condition. Some days her legs refused to cooperate, forcing her to rely on a walker. Others, her energy drained so completely she could barely speak. Through it all, Alexander remained her rock, his love a beacon in the gathering dark. One night, as moonlight filtered through their bedroom window, Genevieve lay in his arms, her breathing uneven. "What if I can't dance with you anymore?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alexander tightened his hold, his lips brushing her forehead. "Then I'll carry you," he said. "I'll be your strength, your legs, whatever you need. I promise to build a life with you, stronger than any foundation. That doesn't change no matter what." She smiled, a fragile thing that held all her courage, and he felt the weight of their vows settle deeper, binding them against the storm. The city hummed beyond their windows, its lights a constellation of hope. But in that moment, their world was just the two of them, holding fast to a love that refused to break, even as shadows loomed larger, waiting to test the strength of their bond. The penthouse, once a sanctuary of love, hummed with a quiet tension that Genevieve Okoye felt like a chill against her skin. The vibrant textiles and art that marked her presence still adorned the walls, but their warmth seemed to fade under the weight of unspoken doubts. She sat at her desk, her hazel eyes scanning a laptop screen, her fingers trembling not from her illness, but from a growing unease. Alexander Whitmore, her husband, was still the man who'd moved mountains to support her, but his world was shifting. His empire demanded more of him, pulling him into late-night calls and urgent meetings, and with each absence, a shadow crept into their home. Genevieve, battling her autoimmune disorder with fierce determination, felt the first cracks in their foundation, not in their love, but in her belief that she could still be his equal. It began subtly, like a hairline fracture in glass. Alexander's latest project, a massive development in a neighboring city, consumed him. He spoke of it with a fire she hadn't seen since their early days, his blue eyes alight with excitement. But the name Victoria Bennett, the project's brilliant manager, slipped into his conversations with increasing frequency. "Victoria's found a way to streamline the permits," he'd say, or "Victoria's idea could save us millions." Each mention was a pebble in Genevieve's heart, piling up until they formed a weight she couldn't ignore. She saw Victoria's face on the company's internal network, a striking blonde with confident green eyes, her vitality a stark contrast to Genevieve's fragile frame. In photos, Victoria stood close to Alexander, their heads bent over blueprints, their laughter captured in candid moments that felt too intimate. Genevieve tried to push the thoughts away. Alexander was devoted, his love proven through countless nights by her side, reading poetry when her strength failed, adapting their home to her needs. But as she watched him pace their living room during a late call, his voice warm with amusement as he spoke to Victoria, doubt took root. "You're right. We should discuss this in person," he said, oblivious to Genevieve's presence on the balcony, her walker a silent companion. "I know a quiet place for dinner tomorrow." The words landed like a blade, sharp and cold. She gripped the railing, her hands shaking, not from her illness, but from a fear she hadn't named until now. She was losing him. She retreated to their bedroom, wrapping herself in one of his sweaters, its familiar scent a fleeting comfort. The mirror reflected a woman changed, her ebony skin still radiant, but shadows lingered under her eyes, her curves sharpened by months of treatment. She was still beautiful, but the illness had etched fragility into her frame, a reminder of her limitations. "Stop it," she whispered to her reflection, her voice firm but trembling. "You're imagining things." But the evidence mounted, his phone buzzing with Victoria's messages at all hours, his distracted smiles, the way he lit up when discussing her ideas. Genevieve, who had once commanded boardrooms with her brilliance, felt diminished, her confidence eroded by the contrast between her struggle and Victoria's effortless vitality. One evening, as they sat over dinner, Alexander's phone lit up again. Victoria's name flashed on the screen, and he silenced it, but not before Genevieve caught the flicker of excitement in his eyes. "She's got a new angle on the environmental permits," he said, his tone animated. "It could change everything." Genevieve forced a smile, her fork pausing midair. "Sounds brilliant," she said, her voice steady despite the storm within. She wanted to ask about the late-night calls, the dinners, the laughter she'd overheard, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she pushed her plate away, claiming fatigue, and retreated to their bedroom, her heart heavy with questions she wasn't ready to voice. Alone, she opened her laptop, the company's network pulling up more photos of Victoria, presenting to the board, standing shoulder to shoulder with Alexander, their ease unmistakable. They looked right together, two titans of ambition, unburdened by the frailties that now defined Genevieve's days. She closed the laptop, her hands trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. She'd fought her illness with everything she had, but this was a battle she didn't know how to win. Alexander loved her. She didn't doubt that. But love wasn't enough if she was holding him back from the life he was meant to live, a life of vitality and conquest she could no longer share. The next morning, Alexander was up early, already dressed for a trip to the project site. "I'll be back tonight," he said, kissing her forehead, his lips lingering as if sensing her distance. "It's just a quick meeting with Victoria to go over the latest plans." Genevieve nodded, her smile practiced, but her heart clenched at the casual mention of her name. "Give her my best," she said, her voice small, hating how it betrayed her. As he left, the penthouse felt cavernous, its beauty a hollow reminder of the life they'd built. She moved to the balcony, the city sprawling below, its energy a cruel contrast to her own. Her hands gripped her walker, her resolve hardening. She couldn't be his burden, couldn't watch him dim his light to match her fading one. That night she lay awake, the city lights casting patterns across the ceiling. Alexander's sweater was folded beside her, a talisman against the growing fear that she was no longer enough. She thought of their first meeting, the coffee spill that had sparked their love, the rooftop where he'd proposed under a sky of stars. Those memories were treasures, but they couldn't silence the whisper of doubt. Was she tying him to a life of limitation? Victoria, with her health and ambition, represented everything Genevieve feared she'd lost. The thought was a wound, raw and deep, and as she stared into the dark, a plan began to form. Not yet clear, but resolute. She would not let her illness steal their love, but neither would she chain Alexander to a future of sacrifice. The city hummed beyond the windows, its pulse a reminder of the world moving forward, while Genevieve faced a choice that would redefine everything she held dear. The penthouse shimmered like a winter dream, transformed into a wonderland of twinkling lights and fragrant evergreens. Crystal garlands draped across mantels caught the soft glow of candles, casting rainbows on the walls, while a towering Christmas tree stood sentinel in the living room, its ornaments glinting with memories of love and promise. Genevieve Okoye moved through the space with practiced grace, her emerald gown flowing like liquid starlight, concealing the fragility of her steps. The party was her vision, a celebration meant to honor the resilience of her marriage to Alexander Whitmore, a testament to their love's triumph over her illness. Yet beneath her radiant smile, a storm raged, a decision made in the sleepless nights of doubt, a plan to give Alexander the freedom she believed he deserved. Tonight, at the stroke of midnight, she would slip away, leaving behind the life they'd built and a letter to explain her broken heart. Guests filled the penthouse, their laughter mingling with the delicate strains of a string quartet. the clink of champagne flutes a counterpoint to the festive carols. Genevieve played the perfect hostess, her hazel eyes sparkling as she greeted business associates and friends, ensuring every glass was filled, every conversation warm. Her walker, discreetly tucked away, was replaced by sheer will, her movements careful but confident, honed by months of grueling physical therapy. She caught glimpses of Alexander across the room, his blonde hair catching the light, his tuxedo impeccable, the cobalt blue tie she'd given him a silent reminder of their bond. He smiled at guests, his charm effortless, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the distracted glances at his phone. Messages from Victoria Bennett, no doubt. Victoria arrived at 8, a vision in scarlet that turned heads. Her confident stride and green eyes radiated vitality, a stark contrast to Genevieve's careful poise. When Alexander introduced them, Genevieve extended a hand, her smile honeyed but cool. "I feel like I know you already," Victoria said warmly, her voice carrying a friendliness that felt like a blade. "Alexander speaks so highly of you." Genevieve's grip tightened briefly, her voice smooth as silk. "How interesting. He speaks of you constantly, too." The words were polite, but their edge was sharp, a fleeting crack in her composure. She excused herself, moving to the bar, her heart pounding as she watched them from afar. They fell into conversation with an ease that twisted her insides. Victoria's animated gestures, Alexander's attentive nods, their shared laughter a melody she no longer knew. The party was a triumph, every detail flawless, the caterers serving a fusion of Alexander's favorite dishes and her cultural flavors, the decorations blending her heritage with holiday elegance. Yet each moment felt like a farewell. Genevieve circulated, her smile unwavering, but her mind was elsewhere, mapping out her exit. She'd planned it meticulously, a suitcase packed and smuggled to a waiting car, her passport and letter tucked into her evening bag. The letter, written in her elegant script, lay heavy in her thoughts. "My dearest Alexander," it began, "I love you too much to chain you to my limitations. You deserve a life as vibrant as you are. I'm going home to heal, to let you be free." The words were her final gift, a sacrifice born of love and pain. She paused by the Christmas tree, its lights casting a soft glow on her face. Her fingers brushed the coffee cup ornament, a relic of their first meeting, the moment that had sparked their love. The memory was an ache, a reminder of the woman she'd been, vibrant, unstoppable, before illness reshaped her. Now she saw herself as a shadow of that woman, her body betraying her, even as her spirit fought on. Alexander deserved more, she told herself. Someone like Victoria, whose energy matched his, whose health didn't demand constant care. The thought was a wound, but it fueled her resolve. She would not let their love become a cage. As the clock neared midnight, Genevieve made her final rounds, her farewells disguised as hostess pleasantries. She hugged a friend, her smile bright but her eyes distant, and thanked the caterers with a warmth that belied her broken heart. She caught Alexander's eye across the room, where he stood with Victoria, their heads bent over his phone, discussing some urgent project detail. He didn't notice her gaze, didn't see the way her hand trembled as she adjusted her gown. The quartet struck up a new carol, its notes soaring, and the crowd's laughter swelled, a cruel contrast to the silence within her. At the stroke of midnight, the clock chimed, each note a heartbeat counting down her departure. Genevieve moved toward the private elevator, her steps measured, her emerald gown trailing like a fading dream. She glanced back one last time, the tree's lights blurring through unshed tears. Alexander and Victoria were still engrossed, oblivious to her retreat. Her fingers tightened around her evening bag, the letter inside a weight she could no longer carry. She whispered a silent goodbye to the life they'd built, the dances in the kitchen, the nights planning their future, the vows that had promised forever. The elevator doors opened and she stepped inside, the soft hum of descent swallowing the party's noise. As the doors closed, a single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek like a fallen star. The car waited below, arranged by their housekeeper, Maria, who had kept her secret with a heavy heart. Genevieve's plan was simple but final, a flight to a distant city, a clinic known for experimental treatments, a chance to heal away from the man she loved too much to burden. The letter would explain it all, her love poured onto the page, her hope that he'd find happiness without guilt. The elevator descended, each floor pulling her further from the penthouse, from Alexander, from the dreams they'd woven together. Outside, the city glittered with Christmas lights, a constellation of joy that mocked her solitude. The car door opened and she slid inside, her suitcase a silent companion. As the driver pulled away, the penthouse lights faded in the rearview mirror, a beacon of the life she was leaving behind. Genevieve clutched the coffee cup ornament she'd slipped into her bag, its weight a tether to the past. She didn't look back again, her heart too heavy, her resolve too fragile. The city's pulse thrummed around her, but she was already elsewhere, carried toward an uncertain future, her love for Alexander the only light guiding her through the dark. As the car vanished into the night, the party continued above, unaware that its heart had slipped away, leaving only a letter to speak her truth. The penthouse pulsed with the fading echoes of the Christmas party, the air thick with the scent of pine and champagne, the string quartet's final notes lingering like a ghost. Alexander Whitmore stood near the towering Christmas tree, its lights casting fractured reflections across his face, his blonde hair disheveled from running his hands through it. The crowd's laughter and clinking glasses felt like a mockery, a veneer over the growing unease that gnawed at his chest. Genevieve Okoye, his wife, was nowhere to be seen. He'd caught glimpses of her earlier, her emerald gown a beacon of grace, but now her absence was a void, pulling at him with an urgency he couldn't name. Victoria Bennett, radiant in scarlet, was mid-sentence about the latest project breakthrough when Alexander interrupted, his voice sharp with sudden alarm. "Have you seen Genevieve?" he asked, scanning the room, his blue eyes darting over faces that offered no answers. Victoria's brow furrowed, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features. "She was by the bar earlier, probably hosting," she said. But Alexander was already moving, weaving through the crowd with a purpose that silenced conversations. His heart raced, a primal instinct whispering that something was wrong. He checked the balcony, the kitchen, the guest rooms, each space tightening the knot in his stomach. Maria, their housekeeper, was arranging napkins in the dining area, her hands faltering as she met his gaze. "Maria, where's Mrs. Whitmore?" he demanded, his voice low but edged with fear. Her eyes dropped, her fingers twisting in her apron. "I haven't seen her, sir," she said, but the lie trembled in her voice, and Alexander's blood ran cold. He strode to their bedroom, hoping to find Genevieve resting, her stamina still fragile from her illness. The room was dark, the bed untouched, but something was off, a subtle shift in the air. His eyes, trained to notice the smallest details, caught the absence of her perfume bottle on the vanity, the slightly ajar drawer where she kept her passport. Then he saw it, a cream-colored envelope on her desk, his name written in her elegant script. His hands shook as he tore it open, the paper crisp and formal, a stark contrast to the love letters they'd once shared. The words hit like a physical blow. "My dearest Alexander, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Please don't try to find me. I love you too much to chain you to my limitations. You deserve a life as vibrant as you are, one I can no longer give you. I've seen you with Victoria, the way you light up with her ideas, her energy. She's your equal now, while I've become a burden. Let me give you this final gift, your freedom. Be happy, my love. All my heart, Genevieve." Alexander read the letter 3 times, each word carving deeper into his soul. The party's noise filtered through the door, a cruel reminder of the world moving on while his unraveled. He burst from the bedroom, the letter crushed in his fist. "Maria!" His voice cut through the festive hum, heads turning. She appeared, her face a mask of sympathy. "When did she leave?" he demanded. Maria's voice cracked. "At midnight, sir, as she planned. She didn't want to ruin your party." The word "planned" was ash in his mouth. "How long?" he pressed. "A few days," Maria admitted. "She was heartbroken, sir, watching you with Miss Bennett. She thought it was best." The room spun, and Alexander gripped the wall, barely noticing Victoria's approach. "Samuel, what's wrong?" she asked, concern in her green eyes. He turned, seeing her clearly for the first time. not as a colleague, but as the catalyst for Genevieve's pain. "She's gone," he whispered, his voice raw. "Genevieve thinks I'm in love with you." Victoria stepped back, shock crossing her face. "That's ridiculous. We're just colleagues." Alexander's laugh was bitter. "Are we? The late calls, the dinners, the way I talk about your ideas. She saw it all, and I was too blind to notice." He turned to the crowd, his voice carrying the authority that had built his empire. "Everyone, leave. The party's over." Guests filed out in confused silence, the carols now a mockery. Alone, Alexander sank to the floor by the Christmas tree, the ornaments, each a memory of their love, glinting like tears. The coffee cup from their first meeting, the snowflake from their engagement, stared back at him, accusing. He dialed Genevieve's number, his hands trembling, but her voicemail answered, her warm voice a ghost. "You've reached Genevieve Whitmore. Please leave a message." The name Whitmore pierced him. She still carried his name for now. Desperate, he called his private investigators, piecing together her movements. She'd withdrawn cash, left no digital trail, but a lead pointed to a private clinic in a distant city known for experimental treatments. He clutched the coffee cup ornament, its weight a lifeline, and ordered his jet prepared. As the city slept, he paced, rereading her letter, each line a revelation of his failure. He'd been so consumed with her care, with keeping the business afloat, that he hadn't seen her pain, her fear of losing him to Victoria's vitality. The realization was a knife, twisting with every memory of her forced smiles, her quiet withdrawals. At dawn, his jet cut through a gray sky, the ornament in his pocket a talisman of their beginning. The clinic loomed ahead, sterile and imposing, and he raced inside, his heart pounding with hope. But the doctor's face stopped him cold. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice heavy, "Genevieve underwent a risky procedure yesterday. She didn't survive." The world collapsed, his knees buckling as he gripped the counter. "There's more," the doctor continued, her eyes soft with pity. "She was 5 weeks pregnant." The words were a final, shattering blow. Alexander sank to the floor, sobs tearing from his chest, the ornament slipping from his hand to clatter on the tile. He'd lost her, their unborn child, their future, all because he'd failed to see her heart breaking right in front of him. The graveyard lay silent under a sky heavy with clouds, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and wilting flowers. Alexander Whitmore stood before a simple headstone, its inscription stark against the gray marble. Genevieve Okoye, Whitmore, beloved wife and mother. The words carved a fresh wound in his chest, each syllable a reminder of the life and the child he'd lost. His blonde hair, once meticulously styled, hung disheveled, dampened by the mist that cloaked the world in a mournful haze. In his hand, he clutched the coffee cup ornament from their first meeting, its ceramic surface cold against his palm, a fragile tether to a love now buried beneath the earth. The city's distant lights twinkled like mocking stars, their festive glow a cruel contrast to the darkness that had swallowed his world. Alexander, the billionaire who had built an empire of steel and glass, stood broken, his heart as shattered as the dreams he'd shared with Genevieve. He knelt, his knees sinking into the soft ground, and traced the letters of her name with trembling fingers. The reality of her absence was a physical ache, a void that no amount of wealth or ambition could fill. The clinic's sterile words echoed in his mind. She didn't survive. She was 5 weeks pregnant. The revelation of their unborn child, a life they'd never know, had torn him apart, each sob a raw confession of his failure. He'd been blind to her pain, to the doubts that drove her to that distant clinic, to the sacrifice she'd made in believing he deserved a life without her. The coffee cup ornament, once a symbol of their beginning, now felt like a weight, a reminder of the moment he'd let slip through his fingers. The graveyard was empty, save for the whispers of the wind through bare branches, each gust carrying the echo of Genevieve's voice, her laughter in the cafe, her vows under the starlit sky, her whispered fears in their darkened bedroom. Alexander closed his eyes and memories flooded him. Her emerald gown at the Christmas party, the way her hazel eyes had sparkled with love before doubt shadowed them, the letter she'd left, its words etched into his soul. "I love you too much to chain you to my limitations." She'd thought herself a burden, but she was his light, his reason, his home. And he'd failed to show her, lost in the demands of a project, in Victoria's easy camaraderie, in his arrogance that he could fix everything. He pressed the ornament to his chest, his tears soaking into his coat. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice hoarse, breaking the silence of the night. "I should have seen you, really seen you. I should have told you every day that you were enough, more than enough." The words were futile, swallowed by the indifferent air, but he spoke them anyway, a litany of regret for the wife he'd loved and the child he'd never meet. The child, 5 weeks, a heartbeat he'd never hear, a dream snuffed out before it could take shape. The thought was a knife, twisting deeper with every breath. He imagined Genevieve, alone in that clinic, making a choice she thought would set him free, carrying their child and her love to her final moment. The city beyond the graveyard pulsed with life, its Christmas lights a distant constellation of joy that felt like betrayal. Alexander stood, his legs unsteady, and placed the ornament at the base of her headstone, its delicate curve catching the faint light. It was all he had left of their beginning, the coffee spill that had sparked their love, the moment he'd known she was his future. Now it was a relic of his failure, a symbol of the life he'd taken for granted. He sank back to his knees, his hands gripping the earth as if he could hold on to her memory, keep her close through sheer will. "Why didn't you tell me?" he murmured, his voice cracking. "About the baby, about your fears, about everything." He saw her face in his mind, her radiant smile, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the quiet strength she'd shown through her illness. He thought he was her rock, but he'd missed the cracks in her heart. The way she'd watched him with Victoria, misinterpreting his excitement for the project as something more. He'd been a fool, caught up in blueprints and deadlines, blind to the woman who was his true foundation. The wind carried a faint carol from the city, its melody a cruel echo of the party where she'd slipped away. Alexander's thoughts drifted to that night, her graceful movements, her forced smiles, the letter he'd found too late. He'd sent the guests home, their confused murmurs fading as he stood alone by the Christmas tree, the ornaments mocking him with their memories. The coffee cup, the snowflake from their engagement, the tiny chalet from their honeymoon, each a chapter in a story he'd thought would last forever. Now he was alone, his empire meaningless without her. He looked up at the sky, the clouds parting to reveal a single star, its light faint but piercing. It felt like Genevieve, watching him, her love lingering even in death. "I'll carry you with me," he vowed, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. "You and our child. I'll live for you, make something worthy of your light." He didn't know how yet, but the promise anchored him, a purpose born from loss. He'd build something, a foundation, a legacy that honored her courage, her love, her sacrifice. The graveyard grew colder, the mist thickening, but Alexander lingered, unwilling to leave her side. He touched the headstone one last time, his fingers lingering on her name, and whispered, "I love you, Genevieve. Always." The words were a prayer, a plea, a vow to a woman who had changed him forever. As he stood, the city's lights flickered in the distance, a reminder of the world moving on. But for Alexander, time had stopped, frozen in the moment he'd lost her. The coffee cup ornament gleamed faintly at the grave's base, a small piece of their story left to weather the seasons, just as he would weather this grief, carrying her love in every step, every breath, every beat of his broken heart. As Alexander stands alone under the stars, mourning Genevieve and their unborn child, we leave this tale of love, loss, and regret, hoping it has touched your heart as deeply as it has ours. What did you feel as their story unfolded? Did Genevieve's sacrifice move you, or did Alexander's blindness resonate with your own experiences? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this journey spoke to you. If this story stirred your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt narratives and hit that notification bell to never miss a new chapter. Thank you for joining us in this poignant tale, for letting us weave this story into your day. Until we meet again, May you continue to seek out the stories that remind us of what it means to love and live fully. Farewell for now, and see you in the next video.